Good morning. I'm going to call the meeting of the University of Minnesota's Board of Regents to order. And as we get started this morning, I'll note that two of our colleagues, Regents Anderson and Simmons, are unable to join us today due to family, one family health and another family commitment, and Regent Rocha is actively in the process of trying a case this week and is in court. So we are 9 instead of 12 today, but you know where those other members are, and they are conflicted without options. So President Kaler, I think we're going to begin the meeting today with introduction of a very important member of our senior leadership team. Thank you.
Chair McMillan and members of the board, it is my pleasure today to introduce to you the new dean of our medical school and the interim vice president for health sciences, Jacob Tolar. Dr. Tolar, would you please join me at the podium? The Dean of the Medical School is responsible for advancing the university's academic, research, and outreach mission in the medical school, including collaborations between the Twin Cities and Duluth Medical School campuses. That work includes our entire academic health center, the broader university, and affiliated clinical education settings across the state, and overseeing the responsible administration, planning, stewardship, management, and accountability of its critical resources. Jacob has taken on the role of interim vice president for health sciences while we determine an ideal structure for the continued success of our health sciences. These are jobs that require a lot of energy, a ton of passion, and a bundle of inspiration. And if you've ever met Jacob, spent a half hour with him, or heard him talk about his work, you know that energy, passion, and inspiration are what he is all about. Simply put, he's a remarkable leader, a compassionate clinician, and internationally recognized for his research around regenerative medicine. He is, among other positions, a distinguished McKnight Professor in the Department of Pediatrics, Blood and Marrow Transplantation, and Director of our Stem Cell Institute. He's been a medical school faculty member for 25 years, and his collaborative and engaging approach in working with elected officials, citizens, healthcare partners, and colleagues within the institution is impressive. He is a rare senior leader. I have never had anyone else on my team be excused from a meeting because they had to perform life-saving surgery on a child. That's Dean Tolar. Congratulations, Jacob. Please say a few words.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, President. Thank you, the Regents. The surgery went fine, by the way. You know, everybody's good. Mother's happy. You know, the staff is happy, and it is one of the things that we do so well at the University of Minnesota. It is the first time in the history of medicine that we have generated a donor for non-hematopoietic, not blood-forming cells by doing bone marrow transplantation first. So this is what we do well. This is why, when asked by the President, the Regents, the leadership of this university to take on this job of the Vice President and the Dean of the Medical School, I had two options. The one was yes, and the other one was yes, sir. And that's because my inner dedication to this university and to the legacy of academia at large and the service we provide to the community. And I have been tremendously inspired by the leadership and tremendously inspired by what we do, but even more so what we can do. So on that front, I learned from the President that excellence is not a vector, it is a matrix. It is a system whereby we can make people grow into what they should be and can become, and that is a tremendous satisfaction of being able to serve the community. With the difficult relationships sometimes that we have with our healthcare partners, we have adopted a firmer, much more muscular approach to the negotiations because we have something to offer to them. And we also deployed what I would call imaginative pragmatism, whereby we can actually get what we need on behalf of the Regent, on behalf of the President, on behalf of the leadership of this great university. Thank you very much. I'm honored and humbled by this option to serve. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tolar and President Kaler, and it seems kind of sterile now to go from that kind of a commentary around imaginative pragmatism to approving the minutes from our last board meeting on in December 14th. So if there's a regent that would move and perhaps second that, we can move them.
Second.
All right. Any additions, edits, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. And now on to some other type of imaginative pragmatism. President Kaler, can you share your report with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a particularly busy couple of weeks on our Twin Cities campus, and I want to thank first off Vice President for University Services Mike Bertelson and his entire team for their excellent work and remarkable patience and for the very long hours of work they put in. First, we had a massive snowfall that required some tough decisions, and then a Herculean effort to plow and shovel out our campus, and that was done with lightning speed. Then we had a very dangerous incident at the Graduate Hotel on our campus, and with wonderful professionalism, Chief Matt Clark, in cooperation with our public safety partners in the region, saw that through to a safe conclusion. Finally, we were host to a spectacular NFL honors event last Saturday at Northrop that went off without a hitch. And other facilities were also used to check in the Super Bowls, thousands of volunteers and staff, and we provided practice space for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, allowing us to take at least a little bit of credit for their victory, but not for their fans. Thank you to the University Services team, including our UMPD, and also thank you to Senior Vice President Brian Burnett for his effective leadership of those organizations. And thank you to all the others in the community who faced some inconveniences as we helped Minnesota be a typically friendly host to thousands of out-of-towners. Let me turn to our employee engagement work. As you know, last fall we conducted the university's 4th employment engagement survey. Participation was the highest ever, with 71% of employees taking the survey, which is just 1 percentage point off this board's gold measure of achieving a 72% participation rate by 2021. Leaders from across the university received their results last month and will gather input, plan, and begin to take action. And this year we've nearly doubled the number of leaders receiving survey results, and that will provide the more local data we need to support positive action. In general, once again, the survey results showed a very high and increasing level of engagement, and in fact those levels of engagement and connection to their work surpass the benchmark for large organizations and are nearly on par with the very highest performing organization benchmarks. Happy and engaged employees deliver extraordinary services to our students, and of course that's why we come to work every day. Around the system, there's good news. At Morris, 4 of our students are Fulbright semifinalists, and it's a diverse quartet of young scholars that reflects Morris's commitment to diversity. 2 students from military families, one of whom is disabled, and a student of color. At Crookston, for the 43rd straight year, a few weeks ago, students and faculty celebrated Agorama, a festival that recognizes UMC's scholarship, teaching, and outreach in agronomy, animal science, horticulture, agricultural business, and natural resources. UMD, well, UMD is going to the Olympics. From curling with 3 USA team members to women's ice hockey players from Duluth playing on teams USA, Canada, Switzerland, Sweden, and Korea, the Bulldogs are well represented. The Gophers lead all Big Ten athletic programs in the number of athletes that they are sending to the Winter Olympics too. And of course, we're all looking forward to meeting in Rochester next month for our Regents meeting and celebrating our UMR campus. Our Driven campaign to support students and researchers is going very well since its public launch just 4.5 months ago. This fiscal year, we are already at $210 million in gifts, on pace to reach our annual goal of $300 million. As for the whole campaign, we're already at $2.7 billion of our $4 billion goal. We've had successful launch events in Northrop, 1 in San Francisco, 4 in China, and I'm headed to Arizona next week with future launch events in Florida and New York. The passion and affinity for our university students and faculty among our alumni and friends is deep and personally very touching. Let me now turn to a new program on our Twin Cities campus that's been in place on our UMD campus for about 5 years. As you know, among a large portion of our undergraduate population are our transfer students, about 35% on the Twin Cities and 16% at Duluth. In recent years, we've upped our game on welcoming transfer students, and now we've added another very important element to their experience. Vice Provost and Dean McMaster mentioned this yesterday in his presentation, but it deserves a little more elaboration. It's called TESS, or the Transfer Evaluation System, and it's a testament to the collaboration among many units on our Twin Cities campus and a model for operational excellence, efficiency, and transparency. Remember, we are a leader in the Big Ten in admitting transfer students, about 3,000 of them in any given academic year. And that's a solid example of our partnership with the Minnesota State system, because about 35% of our transfers come from Minnesota State 2- and 4-year institutions. So that really is a second way into the University of Minnesota for Minnesota students. For years, we've forced our transfer students to go through way too many hoops to find out if their credits from previous institutions will be accepted and to ensure that those lead to progress towards a degree. It often took months. So in response, leaders and staff people from admissions, undergraduate education, academic support resources, and all of the colleges launched TESS last month. It's an online, centralized routing system. Students upload their syllabi from the sending college. It's then routed to an appropriate faculty member and evaluated. If it's approved, we keep an archive so that if a student from Normandale this semester asks about a course and it's approved, it'll be accepted next semester from Normandale College too. It's a small operational excellence step for our university, but it's a great leap to help the thousands of transfer students who come to us every year, and I applaud the work which was led by Associate Dean for University Curriculum, Leslie Schiff. Finally, let me address the closing of the Child Development Center, or CDC, on our Twin Cities campus, which will occur 18 months from now or in June of 2019. I know that the CDC is a superb child care operation, has an extraordinary staff, and it's a great treasure for the families of the 140 children who are currently enrolled, and also for families and children who have been part of CDC in the past. I know that the families and staff who are directly affected by the news of the closing are understandably upset, and others in the university community are deeply concerned as well. I understand that, and I pledge that we will work together to decide our next steps as a community. As Provost Hanson wrote to the Twin Cities community recently, the difficult decision by the College of Education and Human Development to move towards the closing of the CDC in 18 months resulted from academic and capital planning for new and renovated facilities for a nationally recognized Institute of Child Development. We need to, and we will, embrace a campus-wide discussion of options for what's next for the CDC and the university. As she wrote, the Provost will work with the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Senate Consultative Committee to convene an advisory group with representation of the range of interested parties, including CDC staff and parents who use or have used the CDC, and will gather suggestions and expertise to plan next steps. And since the Provost's message, more than 100 people have volunteered to work on this, and that's a great start. I know how important childcare is to families and to our campus climate and to the work-life balance we crave and work satisfaction. I was heartened by a resolution passed by the Senate Committee on Faculty Affairs last week. The committee urged us to find an alternative to the closing, but also added that part of the charge of those seeking that alternative should be to assess the right scale of the university's commitment to high-quality childcare. As the resolution said, however excellent it is, the CDC has always had a limited capacity relative to community demand. So we have much to examine, and we're ready to do that. I look forward to a productive conversation on this pressing and emotional issue for our community. With that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, President Kaler. Our commitment to be a family-friendly employer and a family-friendly university stands at the forefront of what we do. I know many regents have gotten a lot of feedback from the outside world and our communities within the university here about the Child Development Center, and I'd like to work through our agenda today as planned, and then, time permitting, we may be able to use a little bit of time during the new business to have a dialogue with President Kaler and Provost Hanson and others, again, if time permits, in the new business section. So I think you've all come to appreciate that one of the things I like to use this opportunity to do is to try and connect our work every month back to the board priorities we outlined last summer. And I'm going to quickly do that. Yesterday, the Mission Fulfillment Committee affirmed our commitment to, and here's the summer priority, drive impact of the university's land-grant mission through access, inclusion, and student success by recommending adoption of a resolution related to diversity in undergraduate education on the Twin Cities campus. That was the culmination of considerable discussion and work by Chair Omari and the Mission Fulfillment Committee, and I think it's indicative of where we're spending our time. In the Finance and Operations Committee yesterday, bargaining agreements with 3 employee groups were recommended for approval. These dedicated employees work every day to, and here's the connection to, our priorities: preserve and enhance the university's academic excellence and its reputation. And when we celebrate the success of our faculty for their groundbreaking research, teaching, and outreach efforts, and the success of the talented students that we serve, we don't always stop and recognize the individuals who make our institutional success possible. To our unionized employees, thank you for your service to the university and making those successes possible on an ongoing basis. Outside of our meetings, my colleagues and I have been working with the administration on our priority to increase private and public support for the university's mission. That's taken a form through conversation and events with legislators about the university's capital request and its other request, which focus on renewal of critical resources across our system. I've personally been involved in a couple of those up north. My colleagues have been involved with those across the system. They will continue into and beyond the start of the legislative session next month. Changing topics, the university community has provided many comments regarding the proposed amendment to the student group responsibility language in the Student Conduct Code. To provide more time to consider those comments and to consult faculty governance and student leadership, the administration has requested that the board postpone its vote on the proposed amendment. We are granting this request, and we look forward. We will look to the administration to advise us as to when and how this matter should be returned to the board for review and action. And finally, as President Kaler also noted, the board meets again March 23rd at our campus in Rochester, so we'll look forward to that. That concludes my report. And moves us to item 5 on our agenda, receiving and file reports. Please note those, and they're received and filed in the docket. No action needed there. We do need action on item 6, the consent report. But before we consider the consent report, I'll note that one of the items included for approval is a gift from our very own Regent Lucas, and Regent Lucas has recused herself from the upcoming vote. Is there a motion to approve the consent report?
So moved. Second.
Very good. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That takes us to the University Plan Performance and Accountability Report, and I believe Provost Hansen's coming up to pick up where we left off with a lengthy discussion in December about that was review at that point. Now we're here for action today. So Provost Hansen, please note the changes that have been made and set us up for a little discussion before I entertain a motion to approve.
Thank you, Chair McMillan and members of the board. I am pleased to bring for your approval the final version of the University Plan Performance and Accountability Report. That was a draft form. This final version does include some minor updates and adjustments to the copy, and it also includes the highlights brochure that was developed in partnership with my Vice President Kramer and his staff. And speaking of staff, I want to call out all of the people who worked on this. There are people from very many offices across all of our university, all of the campuses. And in particular, Marlo Welshins from my office was really the moving force putting all of this together. So thank you, Marlo. The brochure, I think you'll find useful. It highlights key takeaways from the full report and connects your progress card to measures to the narrative that's in the report. The final report and the brochure appear in the docket. We've provided each of you with print copies. These have been distributed in advance. We have copies here for other meeting attendees to take with them if they'd like. The report and the brochure will be sent to state legislators by our Office of Government and Community Relations. And I'll also note that we make the report and the highlights brochure available for download online all the time, so we can send printed copies as well to anyone who requests them, but they're always available. Excuse me. Finally, I'll note that we welcome your continued feedback on this report. We mentioned last time that you think you might want to think about some more major tweaks given the system-wide strategic planning process, and so I assume that will inform the development of next year's report, but we're happy to take guidance from you on that. But today I bring forward this year's report and recommend it for approval.
Very good. Thank you, Provost Hansen. President Kaler, anything you want to add there?
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I think it's another exceptional summary of the work the university does. It reflects a huge amount of work by staff that the provost has acknowledged, and so I will acknowledge it takes an exceptional amount of work by the provost herself too. So we're grateful for that. We did take the feedback in creating the Reader's Digest version, if you will, but we're open for more suggestions as to how to make this important document even more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost and President. Other comments from the board before we approve this key annual report? Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. Well, it looks like it's already in print, so I don't know how we could not approve it now. Unless there's a larger print run in the future.
It is in print, so did you have any questions about what you see in print?
No, I think it looks pretty good. It has a lot of information, and I will carry it around for the next year and use it as a resource.
We will check on your dog-eared copy in 6 months' time. All right. Other regents, input, comments as we move forward. All right. Is any Regent Cohen?
Thanks, Chair McMillan. I just want to say it's thank you for this report. It's a lot of work, and I particularly like the brochure. It's so clear. It really helps emphasize the things that are really important to the university and helps them stand out. And I think particularly for legislators who don't, this would be a lot to ask people to read. Something like this is very, very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. I haven't had an extensive opportunity to review what President Kaler called the Reader's Digest, but I do think that brings into sharp focus some of the most impactful things we're doing. And I think we're going to hear from Vice President Kramer a little bit later in our agenda about the $8.6 billion number in here with regard to economic impact. So, barring other commentary or input from the board, I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
So move.
Second. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the 2017 University Plan Performance and Accountability Report, vote so with an aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you, Provost Hanson. All right, item 8 was removed from the agenda just moments ago, and that takes us on to our report, progress report, and implementation plans for President Kaler's initiative to prevent sexual misconduct. And I believe Dean Finnegan's going to be our primary deliverer there, but I think President Kaler would probably like to open.
Indeed I would, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I think we all know, from the studios of Hollywood to the corridors of the nation's capital, we have a sexual misconduct crisis in our nation. According to a recent Minnesota poll, 63% of all women in our state say they've been victims of sexual harassment. 63%. We live in a culture of sexual misconduct, and it's now the center of a serious national conversation. And we here at the university are not immune from this crisis, from this epidemic. Whether it be in the classroom, the residence hall, the department meeting, or the tailgate party, we at the university have our own sexual misconduct crisis. It must be aggressively addressed, and our culture must change. That's why I launched last year the President's Initiative to Prevent Sexual Misconduct. Dean of our School of Public Health, John Finnegan, and CEHD Associate Professor Karen Misch will offer details of all that we've put in place to combat this public health crisis and what success will look like as we in this community of nearly 100,000 people on 5 campuses work on a long-term solution. Total elimination of sexual assault, harassment, relationship violence, and stalking can't be expected, but we can and we must and we will do better. It's imperative, and that's why we're working hard in this initiative and this culture change. Before John and Karen report on our progress, I want to focus on the connections between the initiative and our university's overall mission. And I want to focus on my hope, and I believe your hope, for this university and all of its campuses. Let's remember we are here because we want our students, our faculty, and our staff to rise to an exceptional level of achievement in all that they do. We are here to develop leaders who can set standards, provide examples, and promote core values in the years and decades to come. We are here to conduct research and inquiry that creates new knowledge and that finds cures, treatments, and solutions to grand challenges. And if there is any grand challenge on our campuses and in our nation today, it is sexual misconduct. We are here to create a culture of respect and safety, and one in which all members of our community are provided with opportunities to fulfill their dreams to make this a better state, nation, and world. That is our mission, our vision, and our goal. Sometimes we stumble and fail. We fail especially when there are victims of sexual misconduct and the trauma of their assault or harassment derails their studies or their careers. And we fail when we don't work as hard as possible to provide continuous and required training for all of our students, faculty, and staff. And we fail as leaders if we don't face this challenge nationally and locally and take this opportunity to change the course of history for our university and our community. And that's what we're trying to do here with our initiative to prevent sexual misconduct. Shape the arc of history on our campuses, and that's how seriously I take this. We must change the way we behave, or we will continue to victimize students and colleagues, most of whom are women and many of whom are members of our GLBTQ community. That has got to stop. In leading our initiative, John and Karen have taken on the monumental task to lay the foundation for long-term cultural change here at the U. And in my view, a public health approach offers one of the best frameworks to address this crisis. Dean Finnegan's public health approach is to go upstream and diagnose the root causes of sexual misconduct and seek ways to prevent it. But there are hurdles as we do our work. First, we are remarkably big, and so are fragmented with a diversity of personalities, places of origin, ages, and norms that come to us. And secondly, we have scholars, counselors, and healthcare experts doing excellent work across our system on this issue that is unfortunately rarely coordinated. We need to bring all of this together to create pathways to create the preventative measures we all seek and to root out the causes of sexual misconduct and be rid of them. Of course, that's far easier said than done, and that's why the longer view is important and continuous vigilance is necessary. To briefly review, in late 2016, I convened an ad hoc working group that assessed our current efforts to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct, including harassment and assault. Last March, I pledged in my State of the University address to advance the group's recommendation. I asked the School of Public Health Dean John Finnegan to oversee this work and report back to me by October 1st of 2017. After this good work, last November, I charged Twin Cities campus leaders with key responsibilities based on the working group's recommendation as we launched the President's Initiative to Prevent Sexual Misconduct. 5 recommendations formed the core of this initiative. They were required training for all faculty and staff system-wide, piggybacking on the University and Student Senate's resolution on equal opportunity in Title IX training, which passed in May of 2017, and called for faculty and staff mandatory training. Launching a new and comprehensive public health campaign, developing new student educational programming for each of the 4 years with a typical undergraduate experience, but also for graduate, transfer, and professional students, and evaluating our work to know what works best, so we'll keep doing that, and what doesn't work, so we can stop doing that. An important part of evaluating our work so far has been studying the recommendations included in the joint report, the joint report and recommendations on Title IX and athletic discipline, a report requested by the Special Oversight Committee to look into the processes surrounding the football boycott in December of 16. The administrative response to that report, as requested by a board resolution, is included with your docket materials. Now, to get back to the initiative, I've also asked the chancellors in Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester to identify similar programs or recommendations that are appropriate to the needs of their campuses. They are each advancing similar initiatives and will be part of a system-wide conference here on the Twin Cities campus March the 6th. And that's when and where everyone working on this issue system-wide can meet and discuss best practices and innovations. So our process is now in place. Next month, in the first phase of initiative to go operational, we're requiring training for faculty and staff members across our system. As you know, members of our Board of Regents and the university's senior leadership team are the first to take the online training. I took it myself this week, and I was pleased to learn, as of this morning, 4 days after the rollout, we're seeing a 40% completion rate for 700 employees and a 37% completion rate for 326 supervisors. We're off to a good start, and I'm grateful for the attention our supervisors and employees have given this issue. Of course, the goal is 100% participation. I know the training is not perfect, and some people think it's insufficient, but it's a very important first step that we all must take. A second phase, now in development, will consist of departmental level training, and it will provide opportunities for more in-depth discussions. Work around the public awareness campaign is underway, and that campaign will be launched soon. And Dean Finnegan and Associate Professor Mitchell will explain more. But one aspect of what we are trying to do needs to be highlighted. Training, both online and peer-to-peer, will help us learn how to intervene and support victims when, as bystanders, we witness sexual misconduct. We all can and must be active participants in stopping sexual harassment and misconduct. In the end, the goals of the initiative are clear and, with hard work and a long-term commitment and vigilance, achievable. They are: create a university environment that's healthy, respectful, and safe for all, and an understanding that preventing sexual misconduct, assault, harassment, stalking, and relationship violence is everyone's shared responsibility. We know there's a problem in society. We know there is a problem on our campuses. It's got to stop. And we here at the U can be an example to the rest of Minnesota and the nation on how to create a welcoming and respectful culture. Let me be clear. Perpetrators of assault, harassment, and stalking may be few in number, but to use Dean Finnegan's words, they and their behavior toxify our community. They damage our community and they poison our culture. More importantly, they hurt people. So as a community, we need to change and take action, and that's what this initiative is all about, and that's why I cannot emphasize enough how important this work is to me to our entire senior leadership team, and to the health, safety, and well-being of our University of Minnesota community. With that, Chair McMillan, I'm happy to turn this over to John and Karen and thank them and their staff for excellent work.
Thank you, President Kaler, and to say that this is consequential, far-reaching, and vitally important understates the magnitude of what we're doing here. But before I do invite Dean Finnegan and Professor Mitch to begin, I'd use the opportunity to encourage the board to take that first step and complete their training, which I believe just came to us in our email relinks here this week. So, Dean Finnegan, Professor Mitch.
Thank you very much, Chair McMillan and members of the board. And as the President indicated, Professor Mitch and I are here today to give you further details to date and progress in moving this initiative forward. I'm going to provide you some overview and some context, and Professor Mitch is going to give you additional specifics. And we want to do this so that we can leave some time for discussion and questions as well. The President teed up this discussion very, very well. Our university is a learning community. It is dedicated to supporting each other in the achievement of our dreams and aspirations. To paraphrase the American psychologist Carl Rogers, we are driven to express and activate all our capacities as human beings. Everyone who works, plays, and learns in our university community has a right to a climate and culture that drives and sustains the conditions that make this possible. Violence of any kind in our community undermines this right, and it belies our core values. There is a spectrum of behavior that we're concerned about here. Rape and sexual assault reflect the criminal side of the spectrum. The physical and psychic violence that survivors experience is horrific. Also concerning is the bullying, berating, and less obvious forms of sexual harassment and misconduct that not only do psychic violence to the individual, but as the President said, also poison the culture and the mental health of our community. We are not alone in these challenges, as the President made clear, but as a special kind of learning community, we choose to change. The goal is to build a university community culture as free of sexual violence and related misconduct as humanly achievable. We recognize that this is a journey that requires long-term institutional and personal commitment of all the members of the university community, faculty, staff, students, alums, and friends. When we say we're talking about a public health approach, that includes some specific mindsets and characteristics that I want to review for you. For example, public health is what we do collectively to assure the conditions in which people can be healthy. And in that context, public health is also the continuous redefinition of the unacceptable. And I believe that our university community has reached a point where the spectrum of behavior the President described, as well as the conditions that give rise to it, are no longer acceptable. Let me be clear that many on this campus have been addressing these issues for a long time. But what is different today, perhaps, is an even deeper developing community commitment to take our prevention and health promotion activities to the next level. The voices of those who have been dealing with these challenges for so long are being heard at last, and engagement and empowerment across university communities is a powerful force. The public health approach is also driven by evidence about root causes. It is about incorporating evidentiary best practices wherever possible into design thinking about strategies. It accounts for outcomes, and it seeks continuous quality improvement and strategic applications as our knowledge and as our experience accumulate. We use the terms upstream, downstream to characterize the public health approach. Upstream is understanding the root causes of sexual violence, harassment, and other misconduct. We ask the question, what can we do as a community to reduce causes or change conditions before it occurs? That is primary prevention. Downstream of that, there's secondary prevention. In this case, we ask, what can we do to reduce the risk of this behavior and its impact? And in the case of sexual violence, for example, we know that excessive consumption of alcohol can amplify risk. Finally, farther downstream, we enter the realm of providing support and recovery services to those who have experienced sexual violence, harassment, or other misconduct. In the public health framework of a challenge such as this, success requires proactive intervention from a fully engaged community that uses a broad set of strategies in a variety of settings to drive the outcomes that we seek. Engagement with this issue is certainly building in our university community and the community at large, as the President reported. Both the student and faculty senates have passed important resolutions recommending required training and long-term change for all. Faculty, staff, students, alums, and leadership have stepped forward to collaborate in the initiative. And every week, more of our faculty with expertise in these arenas step forward to engage. We're grateful to all of those that have contributed so far, but we also want to remind people that this effort is a marathon, not a sprint. And so there are going to be many opportunities to contribute now and in the months and years to come. I needed to get an Olympic metaphor in there. I want to share a few thoughts on the nature of the overall strategy drawn from the research literature and in discussion with outside as well as University of Minnesota faculty experts. First, a single intervention or disconnected interventions will not change conditions sufficiently to reduce violence and harassment against women and others. Scattershot doesn't work. The key insight is to develop mutually reinforcing, synergistic intervention elements that integrate comprehensively to address the challenge at multiple levels. Yet we also must recognize that different groups in our community are at different levels of risk for different forms of sexual violence, harassment, or other sexual misconduct based on the social conditions that affect them. A second insight has to do with specific conditions that we know shape behavior, and that's the perception of reigning social norms, what we think are the acceptable unspoken rules that govern our behavior. In the case of sexual violence, as in other areas, research shows that people underestimate healthy attitudes and behaviors within their social groups, and they overestimate the unhealthy ones. Why this is important is that misperceived norms are often used by perpetrators of sexual violence to self-justify their behavior. But it also affects non-perpetrating men who may choose not to intervene because of their misperception of what is normal or acceptable. Misperceived norms lead to a conspiracy of silence that needs to be broken. And this applies not only to perpetrators of sexual violence, where the goal is dominance and oppression using sex as a physical weapon, it is also an instrument in harassment and denigration of others, where the goal is dominance and oppression through psychic violence. Addressing social norms, and especially their misperception, is an important component of the intervention going forward. And so, our bystander skills, intervention skills. Whether we're talking rape or other sexual assault or harassment, bullying or other sexual misconduct, bystanders empowered to intervene assertively but appropriately is a major mark of important culture change, and it breaks that silence conspiracy. So, to summarize, this initiative is about long-term, committed, sustained action. It requires us to think in terms of a spectrum of behavior that shapes our community and its culture. It requires us to examine how our university community and aspects of its culture have themselves built and sustained a culture of sexual violence and other misconduct. It will require training and skills building with a focus on social norms and bystander action. It requires us to think carefully about the conditions and risks that affect groups in our community differently, and it requires us to consider policy and institutional accountability to support the change we want and need. Finally, As paradoxical as this may seem, a successful initiative is likely going to increase the reporting of sexual misconduct. Not necessarily because it is genuinely increasing, but because it has been so underreported before. There is evidence that this is already happening in our university community. Thank you. Now I'm going to pass the talking stick to Professor Mitch, and she is co-chair of the initiative, and she will get into some of the specifics of initiative planning and implementation so far. We'll switch chairs.
I was wondering how we were going to go. Thank you, Chair McMillan and Regents, for this opportunity. As President Kaler mentioned, there are key aspects and goals in the initial report, and I'd also like to mention that we had a 30-day comment period where we heard from many members of the university community, and those recommendations were also implemented into this stage of the work. As John said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and so this is how the initiative is emerging on campus. There were about 300 people that were involved in the initial stages. At this point, many more hundreds have joined, and we hope to continue that. So we're trying to provide opportunities for people to get involved, graduate students and professional students and undergraduates, in ways that are meaningful to them. Not everyone has the time to sit on a working group, but we want to make sure that there's other ways for our university community to be involved. So we have key staff and faculty and students on all of the working groups that I'm going to mention today, but we're also actively recruiting others on campus. Related to the initial charge and the recommendations from the report, we had a first phase, which was faculty and staff required training, which again came from a unanimous University Faculty Senate and Student Senate initiative to provide mandatory training on campus. So the goal here is to increase awareness and knowledge to change our culture, and this is just the first step in changing culture so that no one tolerates sexual assault, misconduct, harassment, and supports survivors so that they can safely report. So at this stage, I've taken the new training, and along with Chair McMillan, I encourage you all to take it. And it's going through a system-wide now here in the Twin Cities campus and through the other campuses, where all staff and faculty will be given the link that you were provided this week in order to take the training. We know, though, that one training is not enough. In fact, it could be detrimental if that's all we did. And so now, moving into phase 2, we have a department level development, and this is we use the word department here, but we also mean units. So what type of training do graduate students need that might be different from professional students, that might be different from undergraduates? Well, the same thing with different units on campus of faculty and staff, making sure that this conversation that we hope gets started with this initial online training continues, because that's the only way we're going to get a culture change on this issue. So at this point, we have formed a committee, many experts in this area of faculty development and staff development, as well as individuals with expertise in sexual assault training and harassment, have joined this committee, headed by Professor Uggan and Vice Provost Rebecca Roper-Silman. And that really will generate ongoing discussions and trainings and workshops. As Dean Finnegan elegantly discussed, this is a public health awareness campaign. And as a scholar of higher education, I'll say that we're one of a few universities that are really implementing throughout our campaign a public health approach. And I think it's the right approach, and I think that it is something that I'm looking forward to disseminating with some of my colleagues across the nation. So to create a sustainable public health, public awareness campaign to prevent all forms of sexual misconduct, we started, the working group started by looking comprehensively at all of the different campaigns that are going on nationally. But they also met with faculty and staff with expertise in this area, as also the working group has expertise, to realize that this needs to be tailored to our context here in Minnesota. And so they developed some test concepts, they've had some focus groups, they've narrowed it down to a couple really promising themes, and now that those focus groups have been conducted, they're going to take the ones that the focus groups particularly appreciated, and these focus groups were made up of staff, faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students here on campus. Then they're going to send out a survey, I believe next week, to the university campus, a random sample of a cross-section of the campus to get more feedback on that campaign. So that's moving along. We also know that student education engagement is critical to culture change on our campus, and so we're developing a structural program and education plan for first through fourth year undergraduates as well as graduate and professional students. We know that some of the issues that graduate and professional students face are similar, but they're also different. And we know that the types of issues that undergraduate students face are not monolithic. It can change depending on your social identity and social location, and so we're being very intentional about the way in which we're doing the student engagement campaign. So we are in the process of hiring a health promotion specialist to lead that development process. We've met with EverFi, which is the organization that we're working with on the online faculty and staff training. They also do something called Haven and Haven Plus, which is geared towards students on our campuses. It's used at about 1,700 campuses across the country, and we're working with them too to think about what are some ongoing steps that we can do, both face-to-face as well as these online trainings, to make sure that, again, it's not one training, it's a continuous work, and that it's tailored towards the students depending on what stage they are in their educational journey. We also have a research and evaluation team which is infused with the public health mindset, and so we're developing metrics for evaluating our sexual assault, harassment, and misconduct prevention, education, advocacy, and awareness activities on campus. We've been working to catalog our existing data systems, make sure that those are going to be available to all of the campuses in the university, and we've developed the EverFi online training pre and post survey. So there was a random sample that were given the pre-survey. Everyone will be asked to fill out at their, you have a choice, but you will be encouraged to fill out the post-survey tool. We're also developing a new tool to collect more data, and we're using the EverFi pre and post to begin that work so that we can get a better sense, especially about sexual harassment and other forms of sexual misconduct faced by staff and faculty. We're recruiting members for cross-disciplinary collaborative research, and I'm very excited because we're looking to bring together researchers from across our campuses as well as graduate students interested in this to make sure that we're really focusing on the most important issues facing our campus communities, but also to make sure that we're sharing information and data. And we've also set up an institution responsibility and accountability group. We're looking for chair and other members. This really comes out of the comments that were made on the initial report, that without institutional responsibility and accountability, we are not going to be able to make culture change. If people do come forward, and we do expect, as Dean Finnegan mentioned, based on research, that more people, if the campaign is working, more people will actually start to file complaints and to disclose that they've been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted or there are other forms of sexual misconduct. If we don't provide supports for those survivors, if we don't make sure that we hold each other accountable, then that trust will go away immediately. So we know that this accountability and responsibility is really important. One of the things we are doing is we've invited Dr. Alan Berkowitz to visit again campus, and so we're having a system-wide conference with chancellors and campus leaders to promote how can we share information. We do have a Google Drive where we provide all of our information, try to make sure that other campuses are also able to provide the amazing work that they're doing. But Dr. Berkowitz is going to lead us through some bystander training and some social norms training so that we experience that training and then also can work with him to ensure that we're tailoring that to our campus community. So again, prevention of sexual misconduct and promotion of a healthy campus climate is an absolute necessity, and we want to make sure that every person on campus has a way to meaningfully engage in this initiative. So again, thank you for your time. We look forward to any questions or comments.
Very good. Well, thank you, Professor Mitch and Dean Finnegan and President Kaler, importantly, for your contextual and opening remarks. I'm ready for board engagement here on this critical topic, and I'll open it up for that.
Mr. Chairman?
Regent Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you very much, presenters and others who have been working on this very important issue. A couple thoughts that I had during your presentation, and this cultural idea of sexual harassment is quite prevalent. And that is simply to say, you know, it's okay. It's okay to bully somebody or to say something inappropriate to another human being. And that inappropriateness, we can do all the training, do whatever, but it resides with each of us when we hear and see it to say, that's inappropriate, that's not a respectful way to behave. I look at sexual misconduct in a couple ways. One is overt and one is stealth. Overt is what I've just described in words and actions, but I believe the stealth kind of sexual misconduct, whether it's at the University of Minnesota, the workplace, wherever, is occurring as we sit here. And in my other life and vocation, I hear about it from time to time, that someone says, I am not comfortable with what's going on in the workplace, but I don't dare say anything. I need this job. I need the security. I have a family. I'm fearful of the punishment that may come my way. So in this whole arena that we're talking about, the right and the responsibility for individuals to be able to come forward to another person to say this is what's occurring without fear of reprisal, I think is just terribly important in this matter. Let me go so far as to say, from someone who's been around a few decades, these doggone little machines here aren't helping. Okay? These are very dangerous in many respects. They're great communication, great for research, but when I work with 9th and 10th graders, it's quite instructive to this older person to see the kinds of things they talk about and see and do. Because if I send you a text or communication that is inappropriate, I really don't have to take much responsibility. Okay? I can just send it. Life goes on, but you as a receiver may be bullied, you may be threatened, and all of these things. We all know that, but it's just part of the discussion. So in a university community, especially with our young people, to talk about the fact of our technology to be used in a more responsible way, I think is also important in this matter. I think, my opinion, it's much more prevalent than we even begin to realize. With national international news, people coming forward, people who are quite famous speaking up, saying, we've had enough. Maybe that's our new theme for the university. We've had enough. We've had enough. And we're going to start to treat people at all levels with respect. I don't care what your position, what your status. We're going to start treating people with respect and dignity. Because if we reduce their respect and dignity, we take their luster of life and creativity away from them. That's what bothers me. People who are burdened with this because they have been bullied in 8th grade or they're bullied in whatever. You can just see it. You can feel it. I don't really feel very good about what's going on in my life. So commendations to you, Mr. President, to you who are working on this, and to the university-wide. And I can't imagine that you don't have just 100% support of this board for moving forward and making the culture at all levels of this university, at our campuses, in the workplace, just a healthier, a better place. It's an illness that needs some curing. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I also want to compliment the presenters and on the work, which I know has been done by a large group of people over a long period of time, but I think it's a terrific initiative and it's taking shape. Just three brief comments. You mentioned or described sort of what's needed for big cultural change, and I agreed with all of those points, but one that I would add and think is very important, super important for this kind of initiative is the commitment of leadership, which I think is there. And in fact, I want to compliment President Kaler for his very visible leadership on this issue. I think this is one of those kind of things where the leader of the institution needs to say, this is me. I stand for this. This starts with me. And I think you've done that, and I compliment you for it. And I think that has to be shared by all the top leaders of the institution. It's critical to change, and a failure at that level, I think, really undermines what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I think we're getting that kind of leadership, and it will include us. It includes the board. The second point I wanted to make is, we want to reduce it as much as humanly possible, and I agree with that. I mean, my own little thing is things like this, as far as I'm concerned, 0 is the goal. Yeah. And I know it's, some people say never happen, it's impossible, but your option is, well, 1 or 2 or, a few, and the goal is 0. And for what that's worth. And then the final comment is, it strikes me that all the work that you're doing on training, communication, all this is it's really going to be powerful, very useful. The degree to which and will have value outside the institution, and the degree to which you can share, partner with MNSCU, other institutions, or in the spirit of prevention, is any of this work going to potentially be applicable to high schools around the states? It just strikes me that there's a body of work here that is still being developed, but may have application well beyond the borders of the institution, and can be used beneficially around the state. So thanks for the work. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Regent Powell. I think there might have been room for an answer to a question or two in there, so I'll see if either of our presenters want to tackle one or more of those.
Thank you very much, Chair McMillan. And Regent Powell, I think you're spot on. There's no question that many other academic institutions are dealing with these issues as well, from secondary all the way up to large R1 universities like this. What's interesting about this university is that it is so large, and we have so many faculty that have been doing research in this or related areas. And so that's one of the reasons why we started to pull together. We have this evaluation group where we can do ongoing monitoring of change, but we also are pulling together a small group of very engaged faculty that do this kind of research. One of the things that we see in the literature in this arena is that it really needs to improve. There's some good things in the literature, some good studies, but there's a lot more, and I think we're in a position as we go forward with this effort to really contribute to that in a variety of ways. Hopefully what we are able to come up with, insights that we gain both experientially and by virtue of research evidence, will in fact be something that we can disseminate and share broadly with others.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Regents Omari, Beeson, and Lucas, and we'll start with Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair McMillan, and thank you to both of you all for doing the work, and those who are not at the podium as well. You know, I love the public health approach. I think that's spot on, and not to be surprised since you're the Dean of Public Health, but and I love that. I also appreciate or want to highlight the fact that it's an iterative process. I want to highlight the fact that it requires that we engage with others, but that we also engage with ourselves. And so when we engage with ourselves, and I'm talking mainly, or primarily, I should say, to men, we have to look introspectively to see what roles we're playing. Are we referring to women at the podium by their first name and men by Dr. X? And you know, it requires that we think about microaggressions and things like that that will maintain the culture if we're not addressing those things. And so I encourage us all to be thinking about that engagement with ourselves and the engagement with other folks. I want to point out a few things. I was very apprehensive when I just saw 45-minute training, almost to the point where I said, no, I won't take it if that's all we're going to do. And so that was before I read the docket, and the president let me know that there's a lot more, and so I'm now excited to take the training. And then I want to point out two other things. One is how sexuality plays a role in this, and ways in which we identify in different ways along the spectrum of sexuality as it relates to sexual misconduct. And when it comes back to technology, I mean, technology is a factor in this, but this has existed before cell phones existed. And so we also need to recognize that, and then recognize that technology has actually helped with awareness in a significant way as well. And so for those who might not have cell phones, you're still in it if you don't think you are. So thank you.
Any comment there? You don't need to make any. If you want to, you can. Reaction?
Sure.
Professor Misch.
Chair McMillan, Regent Omari, thank you all for your comments thus far. Very, very helpful, and like you, there's many, many people that are doing this work, and so we want to honor them as well. I think that what this brings for me, brings up for me, or the questions that it raises, is how do we make sure that we provide opportunities for people to have that introspection, recognize that these workshops and these trainings are just one step, right? And so what do we do when we see this happening? What do we do when somebody comes to us and says that it's happening to them? I think for too long, for graduate, postdocs, and professional students, people have told them, well, you know, could wreck your career, so just put up with it. No more. We can't have that. And so I agree with you. If we were just doing one training, I would find that pretty problematic. It needs to be a sustained effort, and I think we need to ensure that when people do come forward, that they're treated with respect, and that we provide a really fair process so that no one is penalized for actually stepping forward, or for noticing when someone else is doing something, that when they use their bystander intervention training or they talk about social norms, that they're not shut down.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. I'm impressed with how we've been able to move from a crisis within the university to something that really moves this issue along in a more systemic way. I gravitate toward the research side, and we, as you said, Dean Finnegan, we are a leader. We have the Aurora Center. We have other researchers from around the university, and it's an opportunity, I think, to project ourselves around the country as a leader, because this is a public health crisis. And we're in the business of research. That is what we do. And it seems to me we should take this problem and turn it into and take the opportunity that's arisen out of the problem, and we're the ones to do that. So I would hope that resources are available to do this and go beyond the training, the culture change, all that. I agree with everything all three of my colleagues who preceded me said. I agree with them completely. But at the end of the day, there's a psychology and a sociology around this disease that needs work, more work.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. I had a similar question around maybe resources and where research leads us. Any thoughts on that, Dean Finnegan?
Yes, Chairman McMillan, Regent Beeson, you're raising a very good point. And just in the past week, I've actually had conversations with two faculty. It turns out that the Centers for Disease Control currently have an RFP out there looking at this that will provide some funding for this kind of thing. So there's sources of funding that, and of course, as you know, as a research university, we're very good. I think that's extremely important that we will be doing everything that we can to see what sources of funding are out there. I'm glad that the CDC has some sources out there. One thing that I was told by Vice President Levine before we started this session that might be useful to know, and my understanding is that the NSF has put a rule in place about the possibility that you can lose some federal funding if these kinds of issues and challenges go unaddressed. So it's clear that there's a double thing going on here. Some parts of the federal government through NSF, for example, looking at sanctions for universities that don't deal with this with respect to their research. And then on the other hand, we also have agencies such as the CDC that are putting some resources into this. And I suspect that we're going to see more, in part because of the Me Too movement, but also because I think universities, not only ours, but I believe other universities, recognize that they have a leadership role in this arena. And so I'm hopeful that that's actually going to stimulate more funding availability.
Thank you. Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. First of all, this was such a great report and so thorough, and I'm really inspired by the public health approach and the way you're framing this with research. But I'm looking back at the slide that talks about upstream and downstream, the primary prevention and the secondary. Secondary prevention often involves alcohol, and I'm looking at this a little bit differently because I have a college freshman granddaughter, and she's dealing with that as she enters the college world. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that, because that's a really hard one.
Yes,
Dean Finnegan.
Mr. Chair and Regent Lucas, you're absolutely right. So we distinguish alcohol. Alcohol doesn't cause sexual violence, but it can be a contributing factor to amplifying it. And one of the realities for students, undergraduates coming into a large university campus like this is the much easier access and presence of alcohol in the community than perhaps they experienced when they were in high school. And I will say this, this university has really done a lot in that area and continues to do a lot in that area. I know that in my own school, for example, and many other schools have done work in this arena as well. And also, I believe most incoming, if I recall correctly, I believe most incoming undergraduates actually receive training through the Haven system on this area. But I also know that we talk about alcohol in college life. I mean, it's a reality. From that standpoint, in the secondary arena, what you can do to reduce those risks becomes really important. One of the statistics when I first started to get into this that really leapt out at me is that young women coming in their freshman year are far more vulnerable to physical sexual assault and rape in those first few months of their presence on campus. And I don't see alcohol as causative, but I do see it as an amplifying factor as young people are moving from their teenage years to their young adulthood and grappling and dealing with these issues here. So the fact that we've been dealing with the alcohol challenge in a variety of different ways, I think, is good. Certainly as we move forward with this campaign, we will also be focusing on exactly what we're doing and how we can integrate a little bit more. Again, not trying to make the causal link, but really trying to help people understand what the amplification impact can be. And I'll defer to my colleague for an additional comment.
Professor Mitch.
Chair McMillan, Regent Lucas. So all students are encouraged to take, and we have a very high completion rate for alcohol EDU and some other work that goes on that's an online training, and then other work that goes on face-to-face. I think it's really key that, again, we don't look at it as if alcohol causes it, or we get into victim blaming or those types of things. We want to make sure that our trainings and our workshops and that our message are really trauma informed, and that's something that comes out of research that's being done on this campus and on some other campuses. I also think it's really important in this for students to see that from even before they come on campus, that this is a place where they can get assistance if they're in recovery, for example, or if they're thinking about moving into recovery. But again, that's separate from, although an amplifier that we think about in the campaign. I think it's also key that we send a very strong message to students that we're moving beyond compliance. This is a prevention campaign, and so regardless of what may be going on, I get a lot of questions about this because of my higher ed law background, regardless of what is coming out of maybe the federal government around compliance, we need to do more than comply, because yes, the goal is zero. It's never acceptable. And so I think that the more that we can work with high schools, new incoming students before they even get on campus, to make sure that we're working way upstream on the prevention, I think that's key.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Hsu, you're the last member of the board on my list here, so your comments and input?
Thank you, Chair McMillan, and thank you, presenters and co-chairs. Thank you for your leadership on this. I think I'm just very pleased to see that we're actually getting started with an implementation of this. When I first joined the board, we actually, within a few months after I joined the board in 2015, we started a discussion on affirmative consent. And I think that was the beginning of where we're going on this thing. We were way ahead of the Me Too movement. And soon after that discussion started, our athletic director was accused of sexual harassment. And I was shocked to find at the time that we did not have any mandatory training for faculty and staff and students, I believe, at the time. In addition to that, the policies were all over the place, and I later found out that the Office of Civil Rights had also identified that in a previous investigation that they did, and that we had agreed to combine various policies around sexual misconduct, which I think we've done. And then we had a series of athletics incidents. Again, I think lack of training was part of that. We had the opportunity as regents. I participated in a training with two other regents in terms of the current available training under sexual assault, sexual harassment, which was good, but it wasn't great. It left a lot of open questions about what is, what isn't, where the lines are. And I think there's always going to be that, although I think we've tightened up our policies a little bit to avoid that. Also, we have introduced the mandatory reporting, which I know a lot of people aren't happy about because of various reasons. They just don't want to get involved. They don't want to have to be the police. They would rather be able to kind of overlook things and stay out of it if they can. And this is coming from faculty and staff. So I don't know how much you've heard about that, but there are concerns out there. And I just want to wrap up by saying that this is an iterative process. I think the good news is we've started, and we've put ourselves in a position to be successful on this. I do note that last night we had dinner with some private college leaders, and it was interesting. I spoke with a couple of them about this very subject, and I asked them how many incidents they had and whether or not they had affirmative consent. Some did, some didn't. And these are a lot smaller schools than ours. One of them said that they had 90 reports. And I don't know that we've had 90 reports in the last year. At least the information I have says maybe we didn't. But they did say that a lot of their reports were not investigated because they were deemed to be not real or credible reports, and I don't know what that means. But again, I think we need to make sure that we are taking the time, and I don't know if we have enough staff, but taking the time to actually look into every report and make sure that we are determining and making sure that the people involved understand why we are or are not investigating, and I understand that sometimes they don't want to have it investigated. So there are a lot of issues around that. But in light of the new information coming out about what has gone on at other campuses, such as Penn State, Michigan State, there's a lot of money involved on the liability side. Penn State, over $400 million to date, which is shocking. Michigan State predicted to be over $1 billion in the future, depending on how they settle. I think, we as an institution, I'd like to think we're ahead of the game on this stuff, but it just the concern that people are fearful for their positions and their livelihood and their jobs, and keeping stuff from being reported. Those are major concerns, and I'm not sure how we. I know you talked about it a little bit, but I'm not sure how we get past that. And in the Michigan State case, obviously, it was over 20 years of alleged abuse going on before it was brought to an end. Now, I have to say, I would be shocked if we had something going on here for 20 years that we didn't know about. But I think that we need to do everything we can to make sure that things are reported and taken seriously. So, and finally, Regent Anderson isn't here, but we had talked about the football report and some of the recommendations in that, and in a prior meeting after in the meeting that we received the report, I did mention that I had concerns about some of the factual information and conclusions of that report, and that I look forward to having a discussion on it, and we haven't yet done that, and I look forward to doing that because I think we need to close the loop on that. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. And I think I'll take this opportunity to perhaps capture the sentiment of the board. Certainly, we're very glad that we're in a proactive mode rather than a reactive mode. I think that with the administration's incredible help, we have comprehensively overhauled and restructured our policies and procedures, from the student conduct code to the administrative to the Regent policies that provides a basis for you, for us, for the university to go forward and implement and execute a public health driven approach to this challenge. And we look forward to further dialogue around the services and support that's going in to help this, the training, the education, the research, and I'm drawn back to the word repeatedly in this about prevention, which is where public health starts and ends. So, great discussion on a topic no one would like to be talking about. I'm glad we are, and thanks to my colleagues for all of their comments. And with that, I think we can let you two go back to your day jobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, since we've got an agenda that's bouncing around a little bit here, and I've already pulled one thing off it, I would like to make certain before we ask Vice President Kramer to come up here for what may turn into a marathon on a couple of topics. I'd like to pull up our fight. You can come up, Vice President Kramer, but I want to get through our committee business here, so I'm going to take that just slightly out of order. And Regent Johnson, if you're ready as Vice Chair of Finance and Operations, I'd like to bring those reports forward. We can act on them, and then we don't need to be rushed at the tail end of the meeting. So Regent Johnson, on behalf of Finance and Operations, you've got some items for us to act on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Finance and Operations Committee considered 7 action items this month. The committee voted unanimously to recommend adoption of proposed amendments to the Board of Regents Policy, Health and Safety. I move adoption of the proposed amendments.
All right, seconded. I think we still have a quorum here of the.
No, we need one more.
Hang on, we need one more regent to reappear. There we have another regent. Now we definitely have a quorum. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Regent Cohen, would you... oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. We've got more out of Finance and Operations. Sorry,
Mr. Chairman,
Regent
the committee
Johnson.
voted unanimously to recommend approval of the real estate transaction related to the purchase of the Keeler apartment building. I move approval of the real estate transaction.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you.
The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2018 annual capital improvement budget relating to the wrestling practice facility renovation on the Twin Cities campus. I move approval of the capital budget amendment.
Is there a second? Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Chairman, we may want to have discussion after the motions. Okay. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the resolution related to the proposed labor agreement with AFSCME Council 5, Locals 3800 and 3801. I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Second, is there discussion?
No.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Chair Johnson, for reminding me about good leadership protocol here and governance. Onward, do you have other action items?
Chairman, I do. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the resolution related to the proposed labor agreement with Graphic Communications Conference of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 1M. I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the labor agreements. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the resolution related to the proposed labor agreement with Teamsters Local 320. I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
I hear a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the revised consent report, which includes the Central Reserve's general contingency allocations, the purchase of goods and services of $1 million and over, approval of schematic designs, appointment of Lori Carroll as Chancellor of the University of Minnesota Rochester, and approval of deferred compensation agreements for Provost Hanson and Chancellor Lindley Black. I move approval of the consent report.
Second.
And I hear a second. Discussion on that long list. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Chair McMillan. That concludes my report.
Very good. And never fear, Vice President Kramer, most of them aren't that lengthy here. So now on to Regent Cohen and the Audit and Compliance Committee. I don't believe you had any action items, but you may have some reporting items for us.
That's right. No action items this month, and there were 4 discussion items. First, we had another thoughtful conversation about the institutional risk profile. Provost Hanson and Senior Vice President Burnett each presented examples of 2 of the greatest risks facing the university and provided an overview of the mitigation strategies that address those risks. We also heard from Vice President Gulacek and Mr. Dolan, our Chief Information Security Officer, about the university's cyber landscape and risk mitigation strategies. Their presentation provided an overview of how the university is proactively working to mitigate risk of information security breaches. Athletic Director Coyle, Deputy Athletic Director McFarland, and Associate Vice President Volner provided the committee with an update on the control environment in intercollegiate athletics. And lastly, the committee received an update on internal audits from Chief Auditor Klatt. She reported that since the last update at the October meeting, 48% of the outstanding recommendations rated as essential had been implemented, exceeding the expected implementation rate of 40%. Also, since our October meeting, internal audit has issued 11 audit reports. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. Regent Beeson, also litigation review.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. The Litigation Review Committee met yesterday, and at this meeting we adopted a resolution that authorized the closing of the meeting to discuss matters subject to attorney-client privilege.
Very good. No action needed there. On to Regional Mari, who may have a lengthier list as well of items for us to act upon.
Thank you,
Please
Chair
proceed.
McMillan. Mission Fulfillment Committee has 2 action items this month. First, the committee unanimously voted to approve a resolution related to diversity in undergraduate education on the Twin Cities campus. I move approval of the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded with extensive discussion yesterday, but I'll entertain any more we may have today. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you, Regional Mari.
Second, the committee recommends approval of the revised consent report, which included academic program additions, changes, and discontinuations. I move approval of the revised consent report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the mission and fulfillment consent report. Seeing none or hearing of none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Do you have further business?
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, and that takes us back to Regent Beeson, who's acting as chair of the Governance and Policy Committee, to bring up this morning's business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Governance and Policy Committee earlier this morning considered 1 action item this month. The committee voted unanimously to recommend adoption of the proposed amendment to the Board of Regents policy, reservation, and delegation of authority. I move adoption of the proposed amendments.
Second.
All right, that's moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. That takes care of our business from our committees with business for us to act upon, and brings us to Vice President Kramer, who's been patiently waiting at the microphone since I invited him up. And I think before he talks to us about the wing of the system-wide strategic plan covering outreach and public service, President Kaler wants to frame this portion of our conversation. President Kaler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. But today is a big first step for our system-wide strategic plan. As we've been outlining for months, and in keeping with the timeline we detailed in September, today we'll hear a presentation from University Relations Vice President Matt Kramer who I charge to lead the focus area of outreach and public service. Matt's is the first of 5 detailed presentations that you'll receive over the course of our next 4 board meetings. We are exactly on track as promised in this important system-wide effort, and I'm thankful to our leaders and my staff for moving this along so well. With that, Vice President Kramer, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, members, Mr. President, thank you for this opportunity to present on 2 very important subjects. But Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to just build very quickly on one thing the Provost said. The accountability report, as Regent Hsu noted, is not only a bit dense, but while I keep my copy handy and use it in a dog-eared perspective throughout the year, I'm very proud, as the Provost noted, that we've prepared a very different little tear sheet at the front that is much more readable. And in fact, Regent Powell and I had a discussion of this, I want to say back in October, November, that whenever possible, we take dense, very valuable information and turn it into abbreviated summaries that people can digest very easily. And then, of course, it has the page reference if people actually want to go and learn particularly more information. I suspect in the future that documents like this will become the main vehicle of delivery to our stakeholders, and documents like the main document would live simply online, where they're easier to maintain and don't cost us the printing and publication cost. Members, what I'm going to do today is take you through 2 presentations. The first is an update on the strategic work plan that you charged the President with and he in turn charged me with. And then second, at the very end of this presentation, a very brief update on the system-wide communication framework that builds off the strategic framework you heard earlier in 2017. Importantly, these are system-wide. They are not a campus, they are not a center, they are not part of the state. It is our vision for interacting with 5.5 Minnesotans in a way that builds stakeholder engagement, builds obviously pride in the University of Minnesota, and accomplishes our mission of engaging with Minnesotans to improve their life. The charge from the President was very straightforward. He charged us with a number of things, and I'm not going to read these. I will simply draw your attention in particular to the last bullet. Determine how to align and incorporate related work already in progress. It is not my intent, and it would never be my intent, to come to the President and in turn to this board and say we need tens of millions of dollars to build a new system. We have incredible work across the system in engagement, marketing, and communication. The technique and travails that we have are to bring that together in an efficient way that builds efficacy and ultimately cost reduction, and that's what we're attempting to do through this body of work. Our approach is stakeholder-centric, and it is informed, as all strategies are informed, by real data. I would recall that at the board strategic retreat, we had a discussion of the Pew Research, which came out in May and June of last year, talking about citizens across the United States and their belief in the power of institutions. And it was an eye-opener as to those survey results as to their comments about higher education. Number 2, and then, by the way, there's been a number of surveys repeating that work and diving into it deeper, particularly on an urban-rural divide that Minnesota is not immune from. We also inform our strategic work on the basis of the longitudinal marketing survey that University Relations does every fall and has done for 16 years. Same time period, same distinct questions. We always introduce a couple of new ones on subjects we're interested in. And that survey as well continues to show a concern in Minnesota as to the value of the University of Minnesota, and in particular, the engagement, how citizens define value. And we believe we have a way of doing that. So this approach, when I say it's stakeholder-centric, it is not about what we think our stakeholders need, it's what they expect from us. And that's particularly important because any large institution over time begins to believe with concrete certainty that we know what our stakeholders want. And our stakeholders are our customers. It's not just the students, faculty, and staff, the people we deal with every day. It is 5.5 million Minnesotans. So by having a very stakeholder-centric approach, we believe we can nuance out those beliefs that then we can satisfy through engagement with all Minnesotans. This approach also has another advantage. Oftentimes we revolve around helping a particular stakeholder, and the example I'd like to give you is, let's say, transportation. The University of Minnesota helps out on transportation-specific initiatives in many different ways. The College of Science and Engineering may be doing work on concrete or pavement repair, bridges, roads. Meanwhile, the Center for Transportation Study could be doing information on road metering or safety on highways. We tend to think that this goes to the legislature, the Transportation Committee, committees, or MnDOT might use this. But that same exact information is useful to county public works officials, city public works officials, civil engineering firms across the state, and other policy and special interest groups. They may be different stakeholders, but they share a common interest. And that's this notion of bundling like needs. So even though you may be thinking about a given stakeholder, you're actually putting information together that applies to multiple different stakeholders. One of the things you're going to see throughout this presentation is we have attempted to assess our ability, and I'm saying university relations, to create structural change within the University of Minnesota system. Structural change is inherent in any large organization. It is neither good nor bad, but all institutions have a cultural, process-driven way of accomplishing a mission. In some cases, we believe that that mission needs to be updated. We also, though, want to balance that with, if the structural change is greater than our ability to make that change, we have a concern. That doesn't mean we're going to give up, but it means that what we have assessed at our first level, you're going to see this, are 4 very challenging areas, but ones that I also believe we can overcome structural resistance. We chose to do this in a very simple way, and the form that I have in front of you is a high-level template that University Relations developed so that we could assess for a given stakeholder group current engagement levels, and we simply sorted engagement into levels of intensity, low, medium, and high. You're going to see an example of this coming up. Some general observations, a coarse, very coarse cost analysis. We did not sit down with finance and attempt to generate dollar-specific values associated with a given activity. It would A, be very difficult, and B, very time-consuming. But we think we can do it at the proverbial 80-20 level, where 80% very accurately, and that gives us enough to begin making these assessments. On the right side of the form are what stakeholders expect. So the current engagement level is balanced by, are we meeting those needs? Recommendations, and then finally on the bottom of the right-hand side, that same dollar and return on investment, but now asking the question, can we reposition these dollars in a different way for a higher level of engagement? And I'm going to show you an example of that coming up in just a moment. So how did we do this? As fancy as it may sound, it started with Post-it notes. We commandeered a conference room in University Relations, and for 3 days asked every employee of University Relations and guests to write down every stakeholder they could think of that the University of Minnesota engages with. So it could be patients to our hospital system, could be other scientists, it could be lake associations, could be agricultural producers. We're uniquely positioned to do that because University Relations has a system-wide responsibility. It doesn't mean we captured all of them. In fact, I'm confident we didn't, but I'm also confident we captured the vast majority of them. We took that data and looked for common threads. So again, this notion that multiple different people might be interested in transportation data, even though they come at it from very different way. We defined unique groups as a result of that and came up what we called 67 unique stakeholder groups. We took that data and for each one of them completed one of those forms that I mentioned earlier. And this is a good example because students, undergraduate, graduate, and professionals are on the face of it 3 different stakeholder groups. They have very different needs in specific, but they have general needs in general. So you see on the left-hand side, for example, under current engagement, the very first example, emergency services. During the course of a student's period here at the University of Minnesota, at any campus, they're likely to receive very few emergency services notice. So it could be the University of Crookston notifying, as they did several weeks ago, closing early as a result of the weather. It could be a Clery Act warning. It might be something else. But it's irregular, it's very circumstantial, it happens at a specific point in time, it's not scheduled. On the other hand, when you look at high levels of engagement, their college, their campus, residential life, student services are talking to them all the time. You'll see some general observations under that. When you have a situation like this, you have lots of people talking in different ways at different times. Again, neither good nor bad, but the opportunity exists to look at that from a more efficient perspective. On the stakeholder side, we've just made some general observations, and then under that, thinking about recommendations, that a cradle-to-grave approach to communications means that we look at our students, again, all levels, system-wide, as having the opportunity to talk to them in a very coherent, measurable way and build engagement with them while they're here at the University of Minnesota for satisfaction in terms of their experience, but also arm them with the day-to-day things that they then share with their neighbors, friends, parents as to the value of this. You'll also see that this must be system-wide. And it's fair to say that a student today, depending on where you are in our system, may have a very different experience. I think, again, from a customer service perspective, and when we think of 5.5 million Minnesotans, we have to build a system that talks to all of our students, irrespective of their location, in a standardized way. You may get different information, whether you're on a Twin Cities campus or Morris or Crookston, but the manner, the scheduling, the activity becomes very standardized and process-bound. We took this information for all 67 groups. We assessed impact. How much of an impact can we make? And again, this is subjective. We needed to move forward. I volunteered to the president that university relations would go first because I oftentimes believe going first, I get the luxury of driving our team and myself to say, what can we get done? We looked for, again, structural long-term change. I'm not interested in tweaking things. We have to build something that is new, it works well, but it builds on what we already have, so we're not asking for huge dollar investments. We took those 67 groups, we reduced it to 40, we reduced it to 16 high potential groups. Why are we doing this? And the question comes up, why not do all 67? Because we don't have the resources to do 67. We didn't have the resources to do 40, and we don't have the resources to do 16. We could do a little bit for a lot of things, or we can do a lot for a couple of very high value. We took those 16 groups, we shared it with the senior leadership team, and received their feedback. Incorporated that feedback and came down with 4 strategic stakeholder areas that we're going to advance. These 4 areas include, in the upper left-hand corner, think of it as generalized engagement. So alumni, parents, elected officials, interested third parties sounds like a catch-all phrase, and it is. It's everybody who wants to know something about the University of Minnesota. If you're the chairman or president-elect, I wouldn't know what the right term is, of a lake association in Minnesota, you're probably interested in just a couple of things. You're interested in invasive species, you might be interested in tourism opportunities, but maybe that's all you're interested in. You're an interested third party in the work that our invasive species team is doing. With media is statewide, and I'll share with you that while we have a very strong presence in the Twin Cities and in some selected other markets, we have some challenges in getting our voice out to the rest of the state, and we believe we have a technique to do that. Youth organizations, a wonderful opportunity to not only engage with youth, so think of sports camps, the Raptor Center, all kinds of things that happen with youth, 4-H. In general, we're spending a lot of time with the youth. We're missing the opportunity to talk to their parents. Because if you're 17, we know what we want. We want you to come to the University of Minnesota. If you're 5 and you've signed up for a day camp at the Raptor Center, it's your parents who are writing the check. We have an opportunity to talk to that parent about their interests and capture them for the next 13 years before that young man or woman is ready to go to a University of Minnesota, any one of our campuses. And then finally, affinity groups. And Mr. Chair, members, I would note you specifically called this out in your strategic work, and we absolutely see that. Affinity groups are very loose. It can be something as broad as you see here, water, agriculture, healthcare, food, high tech. But there are industry associations, and there are these loose confederations of groups across the state that are interested in these subjects, and a wonderful opportunity to engage with them. Every one of these initiatives, these 4 high-level ones, is evaluated on both an external perspective, how can we do a better job meeting their needs, and an internal perspective. Efficiency, efficacy, overlap. You may look at this, and I hope you do, and if you were to somehow peel those 3 bullets back, there should be a dollar sign underneath them. Our ability to do this work more efficiently, with greater efficacy, and reducing overlap should result in dollar cost savings that University Relations can deliver to the President. I believe that to be true. I will work towards that. What I'd like to do now is step through each one of these 4 areas and tell you what we're going to do, and then I'll tell you how we're going to do it. So starting with alumni, parents, elected officials, this kind of catch-all stakeholder, as you can see from this woman, we're coming at her from multiple directions in multiple formats. It can be print, it could be the web, it could be email, it could be text messaging, it could be phone calls. It's not coordinated, it overlaps with each other, and in many cases, and we have the data from this for the last 10 years of various surveys that have been done, as well as consultants, we're providing information that people don't want. Because in a push model, as we are in today, we develop the content and we push it out. And I think as many of us have experienced, if you sign up if you have special interest groups you're interested in, the first thing they do is say, what are you interested in? And then they craft content for you based on your interests. It might be your financial portfolio. It might be a social justice issue you're interested in. We can do the same. And in doing so, we improve the life of this person because we're giving them the information they want on the time frequency they want. How are we going to do it? A central digital content engine, so the first two bullets, sounds very fancy. It sounds expensive. The good news is the University of Minnesota Alumni Association and the University of Minnesota Foundation, working together, have already built the basic building blocks of this digital content engine. What is that engine? Today, when we create press releases or news items, media alerts, generally speaking, the ones run through university relations we help out on, but lots of campuses, colleges, centers, research centers are doing their own. They're not coming to a central repository. If we bring information content into a central repository, this content engine, we're able to repurpose it and share it in a much greater way across the state with individuals that the originating author may not have thought of. Because again, remember, if you're a Center for Transportation Studies researcher and you've got a relationship with a legislative committee on transportation, those might be the only people you're sharing information with, not necessarily understanding that there's civil engineers across the state, public works officials who are also interested. This strategy deals with print publications. I know that that has been a subject for this board. It has certainly been a subject for the legislature, and legislators have on occasion developed rooms full of print publications we print. Print is neither good nor bad. It is an artifice of how we deliver information. It's also fair to say that it is extraordinarily expensive. It requires production costs, it requires layout, ultimately requires printing, and finally distribution through the U.S. Postal Service. There is an opportunity, again, in measuring the effectiveness of this to say, do you still want print? And as we gain in knowledge from that from our stakeholders, I suspect, and I will ask, why are we still printing? And I would hope that we ultimately, from a print perspective, reduce it to that measure that is actually effective. Let's take a look at media. This slide is self-explanatory. The media market not only has changed, it continues to change daily. We have several direct things that we intend to do here. First of all, the first bullet, collect and leverage media relationships. University relations has very robust, very deep relationships with a broad category of reporters, but I will be the first to acknowledge they tend to be Twin Cities specific. And so very deep, powerful relationships with the Pie Press, the Star Trib, Minnesota Public Radio, the local television stations. It's also fair to say, though, that across the system, we have communicators who have very good relationships with what I'm sure are narrow, technically focused publications. So it might be an engineering publication. It might be an agricultural one. That's a great relationship, but if that relationship is not known elsewhere in the university, we can't take advantage of it. We will collect and catalog all of those relationships so that we can build on them. It doesn't mean taking ownership away from the person who has the best relationship. It means leveraging it to new work. C2 is the communications collaborative. Communicators across the U do not work for university relations. They work for their individual college, center, research center. That's, again, neither good nor bad. There are various business models that would say that work. There are other business models that say it might be better to be centralized. I'm not in a position to have an opinion on that today. What I would say, the challenge of that, though, is that some of those communicators are very good. They're outstanding. There are others, though, that may be very junior. They've come into the field, and unless armed with the knowledge and the professional development, and remember, in many of these cases, they may be a communicator who, by and large, is working on their own with very little support. It's not surprising that they struggle. It's not their fault. University relations can and should be developing and delivering a training curriculum to our colleagues across the university on media engagement, marketing, branding, etc. We have C2 as a communications collaborative. What I'm proposing and what we will work towards is more intensive training to boost the professional development of our communications and marketing colleagues across the system. Diversity of media contacts, that suggests not only here in the Twin Cities, and there are some media publications that we could do more on, but I would refer specifically to Greater Minnesota. When you think of the publisher, editor, reporter, and photographer in Greater Minnesota, for a lot of media outlets, that's one person. And if we treat that person the same way we're treating a media person here in the Twin Cities, we're overwhelming them because they are doing everything. They need content that is written for them. They need an approach that is sympathetic to their workload in Greater Minnesota, and we can do better there. And in doing so, we boost our media content and visibility, our earned media, across the state. We've been doing some minor testing on this, and I'm having some good success with it, but we can do significantly more. You'll also know that we've had a national media presence for over a year now. We have one person in our office who focuses nothing but on outstate media. The more we do of that, the greater we boost the branding and visibility of this system at a national level. Whether it is, as Dean Finnegan noted, those CDC grants on sexual misconduct or otherwise, it helps when people are reading about the work of the University of Minnesota in competing for those. And then finally, one of the things that our longitudinal survey absolutely demonstrated was Minnesotans increasingly want to know, so what? Why is this research, why is what you're talking about important to me? And that helps offset this notion of the value of higher education. If all you're doing is explaining why we did research, but not why it matters to an individual, you're missing a huge point. And that will be a transition. We do this in part today, but I would say not consistently, and it needs to be done significantly better. And so look for press releases to literally have the so what line in them. The very first paragraph should introduce to our citizens, why is this important to you? Let me talk briefly about youth organizations. This slide merely illustrates there's lots of pathways in terms of how youth can engage with the University of Minnesota. We're suggesting several things. I became aware, and I was not aware, of a site called youth.umn.edu. It's a remarkable site operated by this institution that aggregates every youth program we have in the state of Minnesota. So think of 4-H, think of a youth volleyball camp. I keep saying the Raptor Center only because my son went there about 20-some years ago. I assume they still have a day camp. This is a remarkable site. I wasn't aware of it, and many people that I've challenged are not aware of this site. Dramatically increasing our visibility to youth is a way to show the value of the University of Minnesota, and as I mentioned, the younger the individual participating, the more we have the opportunity to talk to their parent. And in talking to their parent, we build stakeholder engagement. So develop new channels, and in particular, tie this to admissions marketing. Admissions marketing today, and I'm not an expert on this, really starts with that sophomore, junior going into senior. Admissions marketing for a 5-year-old doesn't have to be what career are you choosing, because I think we all would have chosen astronaut. It can be, let's talk to their parents. Let's tell them about the value of the University of Minnesota. Finally, this is system-wide, and the power of the youth.umn.edu today is it starts from a system perspective. Finally, let me touch on affinity groups. Affinity groups are extraordinarily complex. In many cases, we're on two different sides of an issue, serving different parts of a given affinity group. The challenge is not to rationalize that. The challenge is to build a communications catalog. And I was attempting to figure out how best to explain this, and the only thing I could think of was the joy I had in late October, early November as a child when the Ward's, Penny's, or Sears Christmas catalog showed up, because it was every toy they sold in one place. And so when you think of an affinity group and think of agriculture, the number of resources we have across the University of Minnesota that support agriculture touch virtually every single aspect of this institution. I cannot think of an element within our college system and campuses that doesn't have an agricultural component. Cataloging that allows us to be much more effective in demonstrating our efficacy in helping that affinity group succeed in their mission. And in particular, the second bullet, taking that information and demonstrating to the media the level of engagement we have with agriculture or high tech or healthcare. This actually links very well to some existing work that the Office of Vice President of Research and the University of Minnesota Foundation have been doing that is company specific, and I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. And then just like with stakeholders, everything must have a so what. Why is it important? How are we going to do this? I won't say it's straightforward, but it is to me. It's just work. For stakeholders, develop a project team, model how we're going to build that content engine, taking the existing technology that UMMA and UMF have, develop, implement, and evaluate effectiveness, measure recipient satisfaction, and eliminate those things that are unnecessary. This is not about adding more, it's about doing more and having a customized content that the end user says, this is exactly what I wanted at the time I wanted with the information I wanted. And anything else we're providing becomes suspect. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to get rid of every single thing that that a user doesn't want, because there are some things at the end of the day you do because they have a purpose other than just stakeholder. But I would like to think again that this focus on stakeholders gives us an incredible mechanism to look through operational efficiency and say, why are we doing this? For media, working with university relations and our communicators, look across the system, build that centralized catalog. identify the training needs, and then develop it, and then implement across the state of Minnesota, particularly greater Minnesota. On youth, this is College of Education and Human Development, where youth.umn.edu lives today. It's also extension. You know, the 4-H program is different than it was 20, 30 years ago, but it is the same. It is statewide and has incredible recognition. But I would also suggest people don't understand 4-H is run by the University of Minnesota. And even when you go to the 4-H building at the state capitol, it's hard to see the Block M because we're talking about 4-H. So simple, tiny things that allow us to remind people 4-H in the urban area concentrates on STEM or leadership. Wonderful opportunity to remind low-income parents of what the University of Minnesota is doing for their children. And then finally, on affinity group, build that Christmas catalog of all available resources, build the media outreach, define, implement, evaluate effectiveness. CEW stands for corporate engagement work, and this is the UMF OVPR work they were doing. At a micro level, very quickly, they viewed large companies as affinity groups. And so think of a 3M or a General Mills. Multiple different units within the University of Minnesota might be doing multiple different projects. And if these companies at the macro level, at the C-suite, don't see the roll-up of everything we're doing, shame on us. We haven't told them the full story of the power of the University of Minnesota empowering their business. So our intent is to take that micro work that they have already done and use that as a base boilerplate for building this engagement strategy with affinity groups. All of this will move forward, and I'll be happy to report back on the basis of this board and certainly the president. Let me close with a quick update on the other strategic work that you asked for. The system-wide strategic framework was presented last year, and in fact, one of the requirements of that was to develop a system-wide communication. So again, I remind you, this is separate from the strategy work I just reported on, but just as a quick update. This is important, though, because the basis for this is having a common language. And it was interesting, over yesterday through presentations, not yet this morning, the number of times that I've seen a presenter, a colleague of mine at the University of Minnesota, end with their ending slide, and it has the Block M, it says Driven to Discover, and it doesn't list the 5 campuses. So boilerplate language matters. How we talk about ourselves is nothing more than a style guide. So we worked with communicators across the system, built those core principles, and what you will see, and actually I doubt whether you'll ever see this is targeted towards our communications people across the U and ourselves. And I'll give you a quick example. We tend to use words that, again, speaking from a customer perspective, are very confusing. If you're in the Twin Cities and you say the U, you have a pretty good idea who that means. It means the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. If you said the U in Morris or Crookston, I think there it would mean the Twin Cities. That's not right. We need to say the University of Minnesota system. We need to always include the 5 campuses. So language matters, and this is basic marketing, basic branding. So basically this is a style guide. It will be rolled out through a marketing and communication strategy internal to the U, making sure we're consistent. All of this needs to be consistent, and in fact, just as a quick side joke, on the right-hand side of this is a standardized map, or actually on the left-hand side you'll see the boilerplate that most slides should end with, and I've seen multiple presentations end without the 5 campuses. On the right-hand side, in the 1 year that I've been here, I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of different maps I've seen that purport to show our 5 campuses, including some that have the Block M nowhere near where the campus is. And so if you're a basic geography major and you look at this and go, if they can't get the location right, and then fill in the blank, so it's about having standardized approaches. All of this is subject to the President's strategic imperative. It supports all 5 areas, and it's subject to the oversight of the Planning and Oversight Committee. Mr. Chair, members, that concludes both an update on the strategy work that we're doing in university relations, but then also an update on the communications. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vice President Kramer. I'm pretty confident there will probably be a few, but before I open it up to my colleagues, just a compliment, you demonstrate an intimate knowledge and command of what you're working on that is readily apparent. And unsolicited feedback, I've always found in my life is the best kind, and I've gotten a bunch of unsolicited feedback about how seriously you're taking this wing of the system-wide strategic planning to the system campuses. So I haven't asked for it, I hear it, and it is it is unanimous. So thank you for leading with that.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
I got to say, I love the acronyms that come with this business. They're never ending. And you didn't use one, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to hear DCEs now, Digital Content Engine. So I'm a little worried about what that means for my paper customers up north, but I really appreciate that. The greater Minnesota focus that you've got built into this is vital, and with those positive comments, and you're going to teach me personally what a digital content engine is someday. I'm going to open it up to the group here and see where the questions are. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kramer. By the way, Mr. Chair, all digital is powered by electricity last time I checked. And a lot of it. I want to. This is really a really outstanding presentation. First, I want to compliment you. The amount of time you spend to support the system campuses, I know that they appreciate it. But lending your name and your shoulder to their efforts when all the attention is down here and all the distractions are down here, I think that's just really says everything about the rest of this work. This plan is it's strategic, but it's also very practical. It's very cost effective. The power of networking and connecting dots in ways that our faculty and staff might or might not understand. That is bringing a very different perspective. And the examples you used, I think, all that is going to result in just a very, much more powerful presence of the university. So thank you very much.
Other input, questions from the board? Regional Murray.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I have a question first and then a comment. And I feel like you started to get at the answer to the question, but I don't know what slide. Early on in the presentation, there's a bullet about slide about stakeholder-centric approach, and it says that it allows us to define engagement by common variables. So how are we defining engagement?
Mr. Chair, Regional Murray, great question. Engagement is, I have found at the university there are multiple definitions of the same word, and I have chosen to use our engagement, or I've chosen to use my definition because for sake of intellectual curiosity, we could spend a lot of time trying to come to common terms, and my approach is, I won't say the brute force approach, but you look at a problem and figure out how do I solve it. Engagement is defined by, in a strange way, intimacy. If the person you're trying to reach wants to be talked to, you're giving them the information they want, and they're acting on it. So again, almost like a customer, you're building an intimate relationship with that stakeholder. Otherwise, if engagement is, I'm mailing you a publication, I can't speak for anybody else I can't speak for anyone but myself, but the number of times I arrive home, I park my car in the garage, I walk out to the mailbox, and by the time I've reached the house again, I've already sorted my mail into what comes inside and what I throw into the recycling bin. And there's a lot of print publications that don't make it past the recycling bin. So my challenge to those people is they think they're engaging with me because they mailed me something. Engagement requires you, the stakeholder, to actually comment. I want the stakeholder to say, I'm interested in this, and then we can use primarily electronic to follow up with them and say, am I meeting your needs? So that's my definition of engagement.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Regional Murray, follow up.
It segues perfectly into the comment that I have, because I mean, it looks great. But it looks great, right? And so what I mean by that is, one, I think that way in which you're using the term engagement will be important for the people who are trying to carry this out. And obviously the hardest part is now going to be doing it, right? Yes, so I think things like having a common understanding of terms and what we're trying to do as your team attempts to do it will be very important. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Very good. Thank you, Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr.
And Regent Powell.
Thank you, Vice President Kramer, for this excellent presentation. I don't know if you mentioned it, but one of my favorite things is the UMN expert kind of network that we have. Did you mention that?
No.
And just for people who don't know what that is, I think it's fabulous because we can take the issue of the day, and we can put some of our experts, whether it's a medical expert or a political science expert, which seems to be popular today and every day, whether it's an athletics expert or whatever, invasive species expert, we can put it out there, and these people can get on local, national, international news media just by us kind of saying, hey, look, we have someone here that's an expert who can talk to you about this particular topic. And this is great because it saves the journalists out there from going on Google and then trying to catch a professor, to try and talk about it, professor maybe from another school. But I think by putting it out there and having a professor or other type of person available really helps to elevate our brand in beyond kind of the state of Minnesota. Obviously, I think every good question on WCCO should actually be answered by a University of Minnesota professor, but oftentimes it's St. Thomas or Hamlin or somewhere else. And so I think we got to do a better job of saying, hey, you got a good question, let us take a shot at it. Talk to Heather Brown or whoever is at the station these days.
Vice President Kramer, a quick reply there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to Regent Shu's point, A, couldn't agree more on the expert system, and B, I didn't recognize those other schools you mentioned. They're
around.
Yeah. Okay, Regent Powell, you're going to wrap us up, and then we're going to find Vice President Carlson and get on to our last topic.
All right. Thank you, Chair McMillan. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Vice President Kramer. So a couple of questions. First of all, there's a lot of change here. It's very choiceful, and lots of new things here. Can you maybe talk a bit about big change means a big sort of change management challenge, and maybe talk about what you think will be the more difficult things to get done here, and I mean how you going to navigate this over time, because it is a lot of change. The second question is it has to do with interest in giving national visibility to our our university and reaching out, and I'm just wondering if we have a sense for what are the national messages and message platforms, and we have a different, there are different stories for different media, and I'm just curious about where what message platforms you think would be best for us as we try to pursue that.
Vice President Kramer.
Mr. Chair, Regent Powell, first to change management. This is a subject of some concern for me because my own professional experience and in fact my doctoral work revolved a great deal around leadership and change management, and force of will not carry the day. You can insist on something, you can demand something, and it will fail. So change management is about co-opting, is about finding successes. It tends to be a little bit slower moving. I won't go into so this is not a lecture on change management. I'm thinking about this a great deal, and we will use the best practices, state-of-the-art on change management to engage with our colleagues across the system. All that being said, I will not minimize how challenging this will be. The simplest thing, my own experience has been, the simplest thing results in at least one person saying, this is a horrible idea and I'll fight you to the death. And that's simply the nature of human nature. We all get a little bit concerned when something that we own or have built is at risk. We'll be sympathetic, we will be encouraging, but we will move forward. On the national platform, our work today, we started this a year ago, so it was before I came on board. We have one gentleman in the University Relations Office who does nothing but national media. And it's a combination of both building relationships with editors at the national level, so National Public Radio, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, LA Times. But it also is looking for stories that are ongoing, and to Regent Shu's point, feeding in experts at the University of Minnesota. Because as with all things, editors go with the people they know. And so if you're the Wall Street Journal and you're working on a report on corporate governance, you're probably going to go to a university in and around New York City, or somebody at fill in the blank, and you've always gone to that person and they're really good. We may have an incredible expert on corporate governance, and it's about our person seeing that article and injecting him or herself or our expert into that process. It's somewhat haphazard today, so I will admit that. It's a little bit of look for the opportunities and capitalize on them and get our experts out there. It also has been taking, again, national stories that we have leadership positions on. So the University of Minnesota has several areas where we are acknowledged as being among the best in the world. The latest wheat crop in the United States, where 50% of the hybrids were actually pioneered at the University of Minnesota. Relatively modest story in terms of scope, very big story if you're in the agricultural industry. And we've been attempting at a national level to get that story out, that if you like wheat and you like bread, thank you and thanks to the University of Minnesota. More work to be done there. Today it's a little bit challenging.
Thank you, Vice President Kramer. Let's move on to what is our final item, since we have completed our committee reports. And Mr. Carlson, you're a frequent and appreciated visitor here, but I don't think we've had you up here and with your Assistant Vice President title before us, so congratulations.
Thank you very much, Chair, Mr. President. Confidence of the place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We're now going to do, and I assure you this will be painless, a very brief, quick update. And Link and I are available to answer questions, but the report speaks for itself. And we've also chosen to give you the report of the consultant. So you'll see a format very different than what you'd be used to, because we want to emphasize this body of work. Excuse me one second. We contracted for this work, and this work assesses the economic impact of the University of Minnesota system-wide. The last time this report was done, it was 2011. This is one of those reports that I would put into the category, or a body of work, I should say. It's necessary to have. It's not terribly exciting. It's necessary to have because it allows us to calibrate, particularly with elected officials, the value we have day in, day out. And it has tremendous interest at the local level. But it's also something that ages very quickly. The data in this report is already out of date because we provided data to the consultant who ran with it, and obviously the data has changed. So it has a limited life to it. Tripp Umbach is a national firm. They're based out of Pittsburgh. They work extensively in higher education. This quantifies the economic impact, which includes both dollar value and employment impact. And I draw your attention to the last bullet here. This is critically important because we want to demonstrate, I think many people default to the University of Minnesota and see us as an educator. We are a large, complex business, no different than any other large, complex business in the state of Minnesota. The study overview used fiscal year 2017. It included all elements of the University of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota breaks down the state into 13 economic development regions, so we broke down the data by the state, our campuses, and the 13 economic development regions. And while they're included in your package, I'm not going to step through those slides because this is more for a process perspective for the state to be able to aggregate the data than of true value to us. The methodology uses 3 ways to assess economic impact: direct, indirect, and induced. And let me do a quick example of that. Direct is us hiring somebody to do something. It could be hiring a contractor to build or to remodel Tate, doing a roof repair. The indirect is that business going out and buying supplies to do the work that we hired them to do. The induced impact is everybody and their brother spending that paycheck at Target and buying their cereal and going to the Super Bowl and everything else. The combination of those 3 totals is economic impact. Our economic impact is big. $8.6 billion in economic impact to the state of Minnesota every single year, broken down by direct and induced, or indirect and induced. You'll see on the right-hand side, campuses are 72% of that total, research 14. mHealth, which we specifically asked the consultant to look at this time compared to 2011, is a significant part of our impact across the state of Minnesota, and then extension and outreach. We are a significant job generator, both in direct and indirect. We are the 5th largest employer in the state of Minnesota, and total indirect and induced jobs with our full employment and student employment, 1 in every 47 jobs in the state is attributable to the University of Minnesota system. This statistic is oft used at the legislature, and I include it in your packet, but I can also assure you it's not a number that we go up to the legislature expecting this is the be-all to end-all. If it was, you would expect everybody at the legislature to rank return on investment and choose the best ones. That's typically not how the legislature works. Everybody has a return on investment, but we do want to demonstrate that for every $1 that the state invests in us, we return 13 some dollars back to the state of Minnesota. There's also a strong misconception that for a large, complex business, we are nonprofit. As I'm sure our tax specialists can tell you, that is not entirely true. We have many taxable portions of the University of Minnesota, and in general, or in aggregate, we contribute over $470 million in taxable revenue at the state and local level every single year. I'm going to very quickly step through the campuses, and again, I'm not going to read these, Mr. Chair, because you can pursue them. I can't talk. You can look at them at your leisure. Significant presence, obviously, in the Twin Cities, Crookston, and I would say that in both Crookston and Morris, our presence is disproportionately strong because we tend to be one of the larger employers in town. And you see that when you pick the paper up and you see about a major employer in a small town in Minnesota going out of business or reducing their staff. We are a major part of the economies in all of our locations, but particularly in Crookston and Morris. The University of Minnesota Duluth is in a scale different than Morris, Crookston, and Rochester. Duluth is a major metropolitan area. It is a major economic driver in the state of Minnesota, primarily on natural resource extraction, timber and taconite. We are a major part of the Duluth economy. Morris, I already mentioned, we're a big part of the Morris economy. And then finally, Rochester. And whether you consider it big or small, that's a significant impact in terms of higher education, particularly given our specialized support for healthcare and the fact that those jobs feed directly into the Mayo system as a principal healthcare employer in Rochester. The overall impact? Significant. So our campuses alone, as you saw in that original pie chart, are 6.2 million. And employment across the board for our campuses, of that total of 77,000, 56,000 have attributed to our campus environment. Research is a significant part of our business. $1.2 billion in impact every year and over 11,000 jobs. That isn't just our employment. It's all the companies that support our employment here or at all of our campuses that are doing research. So think of companies servicing our labs, hazardous waste, all of those businesses that depend now on the University of Minnesota for their employment, and think of that economic impact of those individuals going home, shopping at Target, et cetera. In 2017, and you've seen this chart before, I believe, at the last meeting, Senior Vice President Al Levine presented, our Office of Technology Commercialization created 18 startup companies alone in 2017. In fact, over 80% of our companies that the university created in the last 10 years are still in business, and 70% of them are still located in the state of Minnesota. The alumni impact is significant. This is a very powerful number when you look at the very first bullet. Every single year, our graduates, 16,000 students across the University of Minnesota system, walk across the stage, receive their diploma, and in their first year of employment add $136 million to the state economy through their employment. And over their lifetime, and this is calculated at a 40-year variable, they will add $188 billion to the state. Advanced degrees alone, so think of terminal degrees like lawyers, doctors, veterinarians, add $52 million in their first year and $67 billion over their lifetime. And in fact, as you can see on the total of this, alumni living in Minnesota contribute $256 billion to the state economy over 40 years. Our workforce impact is significant, and with 580,000 alumni worldwide, we're a major economic generator, not just in Minnesota, not just the region, but across the world. The economic development portion of this, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll skip. Each slide simply shows the economic impact for a given region. And these total up, obviously, to the numbers you've seen before, although we are making some corrections. We did find a couple of spreadsheet errors, even at this late date. As I said, the numbers tend to change, so you're going to see some corrections, not in the totals, but in how these numbers are broken out by region.
You went past the Arrowhead region a little quickly, could you?
Yeah. I apologize, Mr. Chair. I don't know if this is heresy for admitting I'm a PC user and I'm trying to figure out how to use a Macintosh or an Apple.
No heresy committed here. So,
sir, if I could, I apologize. Oh, here we go. Mr. Chair, I apologize. I have no idea what's going on. User incompetence pleaded.
Do you want to, is Mr. Vice President Carlson going to provide some?
Well,
Or did you wreck his presentation too, no?
No, Mr. Chair, this is the complete presentation.
All right.
Link is here for both moral support and this would be our last slide that says questions. So,
all right.
Sir, thank you.
Very good. And just joking, of course, about buzzing past the various slides. This is the kind of thing that probably needs to be digested a bit and piece by piece. So.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chair, we're going to be releasing this in multiple different ways. One, we're going to be ensuring that every legislator gets this to show the legislative impact of the University of Minnesota. There will be a press release on this, and we'll also be looking for media opportunities to talk about this impact. So this is not a quiet release. This is simply the report today.
Very good. Questions? The board? Regent Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, Matt, it's very, very important to show performance. It's very, very important that we show Minnesotans that we get a good product. We get a good result for dollars spent. How much did we spend with Tripp Umbach, I think it is, the consulting firm, to do this study?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the contract was for $49,000.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman,
Regent Swigum.
Interesting enough, I find we all try to justify in life our positions, and Tripp Umbach is no different. So in the last 10 minutes, I've just been Googling different states. And I can write your news release for you because they write the same news release in Nebraska that they do in Pennsylvania, that they do in Michigan. The same news release includes the words, and we've seen them here before, University of Nebraska touches virtually every Nebraskan in some way. University of Illinois is the main force in Illinois' economy. I think we've said that before. The true impact of the University of Nebraska goes far beyond the $3.9 billion. Guys, I can write the news release and I can do the study, and it's going to cost you $49,000. I just found it interesting that I Googled. I just got to do a few: Texas, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and I haven't found one yet. And some do the studies internally with their Department of Economic Development. They're internally in the university, but I haven't found one yet that hasn't provided great benefits to their state.
Vice President Kramer.
Mr. Chair, Regents Figum, I would hope we provide great benefit to the state of Minnesota. We will write our own press release. So while Tripp Umbach did this work, I honestly can't say whether we could have done this work ourselves. We only do this once every 6 to 7 years, so we don't have a lot of internal capacity or, for that matter, knowledge of how to do this. But at the same time, this is an important number. It allows us to quantify on a dollar in employment value our impact. But sir, I assure you, our press release will not look like Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota. We will demonstrate to every Minnesotan the value of this institution.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think
yes, Regent Swigum.
It's extremely important that we show to Minnesotans a productivity, that we show to them a result. I think it's extremely important. But also in life, it's hard for me to imagine that every university, every state, every college is so good and the words are the same. The multiplier effect, $1 for 13. Actually, Nebraska was $1, $15 for each one they spent. So they're doing a little better than we are, depending upon what you put into the factors. I shouldn't have Googled, but I did it for 10 minutes, and I just found it interesting.
Regent Beeson, last comment here on this topic.
Sure. Thank you, Presenter. The fact is, flagship universities are the economic development leaders in their states, so I expect that those words are going to be similar, not exact, and universities need to be able to do reports at this occasion because we're accused of not measuring our economic impact. So this is a reminder. This is the kind of spinoff that we have, and we're a business, not just an educational institution. So I agree with Regent Spigen that there is money here, but I think this is an important thing to do occasionally.
Very good. Thank you, Regent Beeson.
Mr. Chairman, I do not. Mr. Chairman,
Regent Swigum.
I do not disagree with Regent Beeson. I said it's very, very important to do. But in how many thousands of universities there are in this country, one is not doing a good job. I know there's one legislator that's not doing a good job. I know there's one pastor that's not doing a good job. I know there's one farmer and one CEO of a Fortune 500 company that's not doing. There's one out there. I just want to find the one, because so far the words are the same of every institution.
All right. Before we conclude our morning's business here, we've got a couple. I realize that we're always responsive to our stakeholders, and we've got a large group of stakeholders that just joined us who may not, many of you have been here at the beginning of the meeting. The board, in reaction to the administration's request that we withhold action on the proposed changes in the student conduct code, we did that. So we have removed that from our agenda today. We did not take action on it, and we won't take action on that until the administration brings it back to us after deepened and strong consultation with faculty and student interests. So we appreciate that. And following the meeting, I'll make myself available if some of you would like to visit with us. We're done with our business today, so we're about ready to gavel to a close. A second set of stakeholders on this board with a strong interest, and many in the audience, around the CDC. We're not going to discuss that today because we're at the end of our meeting, but I will personally engage any regents with Provost Hanson and President Kaler, and we've already gotten a ton of feedback on that issue from the communities represented, faculty and staff. So we're getting input, we're listening. We're not going to engage on that topic today, but instead I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn and proceed. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Chair.
Adjourn. We're adjourned.
Excuse me, I'm faculty here, and I want to raise a question concerning how this changes to the student code of conduct.